Welcome back to episode 9 of the University of Rhode Island guitar build. Unfortunately, time has passed. The competition has happened. It was a great fun. I highly suggest you check it out next year. Continuing on with the build, I'm just doing some bridge work here, which involves a whole lot of filing, and I started off by sanding off the tie block just to get everything nice and leveled out, just using some files and some sandpaper to really refine the shape, so that way I can get those arms really nice and round, really make everything look as good as it can. Just kind of enjoy that whole process. I like to use a little bit of a ruler to make sure that my toenails are nice and even, measure up on both sides, and then cut that little lip. And this is just kind of an artifact left over from the way that I generally build my bridge blanks. Be very careful not to get into the arms as you're filing the edge, and really try not to cut off your finger, and that's really the biggest trick to the whole thing. And then, because you get a little bit of discrepancies in the corners, I like to use a knife to chase it up and then really clean the last bits off with a file. It's pretty easy going. To mark the string spacing, I made this jig a long time ago. It's very precise, and I just have to measure out the edges, make sure that everything is centered, give it a little tick with a knife, and then I'll take it over to my drill press where I've got an angled block to hold everything where I want it to be. And depending on the bridge, my angled block actually has several different angles on it. I'm using the square one because I want my holes to be lined up directly with the bottom of my valley. So that way I have the most amount of bridge space available for the string to wear through eventually. The big trick with this is to not poke through and drill into the saddle block. What I'm doing is flooding the entire surface with just some super glue. Ultra thin super glue wicks down into the holes that I just drilled, consolidating the wood and slowing the wear, and it really seals up everything quite nicely. I do like to use a file to get the bulk of it off. I'm using a really fine cut Swiss made file with a very fine pattern. Now I'm making sure not to get into the wood. Once that's all cleaned up and sanded back, I actually like to put a little bit of arch across the bottom of my bridge using my favorite way of bending wood, which is a blowtorch and a pipe. And who doesn't like to play with fire? I know I do. And I'm not looking to add a whole lot of bend or arch to this, maybe about 1.5 millimeters or so across the entire bottom, and I'll get that little bit of arch, make sure both sides are equal because you don't want that, and then affix it to my block for finishing, which has a little bit of a curvature to match the bottom of the bridge, which I've kind of scraped into a nice curvature. I'll fold over some PSA tape because it's a little wibbly. I'll put some onto the edges just to hold everything down, making sure that the corners are nice and tight. And that's actually a pretty important thing for this whole operation, is so that way the bridge doesn't fall off. And this will make French polishing a lot easier because as your hands get gross and sticky, you don't run into any issues. So I'm going to load this up with some shellac, try not to drip. Oops. Well, there we go. So the first magical coat of shellac will tell you kind of what it's going to look like. And I'm pretty happy with this. And what you're not seeing is just off to the left of your frame, I've got a small fan going, blowing air constantly over it so that way it dries a little quicker. And that's really one of my favorite ways to go about doing this French polish. So I'll do a number of wash coats, maybe 3 or 4. Give it a quick sand back with 320 grit all over, making sure that everything is scuffed. And then I'll give it a couple more wash coats, and I'm not filming the whole process because it's slightly more entertaining to watch grass grow than to watch the actual true speed of French polish. And once it starts to tack up, I'll actually put a single drop of olive oil onto it, and you can start to see that luster really start to build as the high spots and low spots are kind of evened out. And this whole process is really about building up and taking away. So as I do this, constantly going back and forth, I'm using increasingly finer sandpapers. So I started off with 320 and went to 400, and now I'm sanding back with 600, and I'm using that wonderful Klingspor paper, which is almost what I exclusively use in the shop now, and repeat the process time and time again. It's a little bit tedious, but I mean, the results really speak for themselves. And after I've gone through this, a number of times, letting it sit for a few moments, making sure that it's not getting too bad, I'll switch up to some of the 1500, and I didn't get that, but here we are with the 2000 grit Niken, which is a Japanese sandpaper. It's really, really ultra fine. The only reason I haven't switched out to the Klingspor for this is because, well, I've got mountains and reams of this stuff and only use it in maybe 16th sheets at best. So I've got quite a lot of it, and I'm using what I got. And if you do it right, and you have a good consistency to your shellac for French polishing, this whole operation shouldn't take much more than an hour to an hour and a half to do, which is, you know, surprisingly quick. Once that's sitting and drying, now that I've got the fingerboard glued on, I'm gonna just quickly remove the excess around the neck. And again, my camera likes to focus on me, but who doesn't? So I kind of like my camera for that. I'll use a draw knife to take away a lot of the extra material, because really ultimately my job becomes profitable with how quickly I can get wood to the floor and then focus on the details opposed to worrying about every cut. Now, I generally try to go for a fairly standard measurement of 21.5 millimeters at the first fret to 24.5 millimeters at the 19th fret, and so that's what I'm just checking there with the calipers and the draw knife. Now, after that, I'll use my favorite set of spoke shaves, which is from Lee Nielsen. After I've rounded it out, I'll use a scraper and use the shadow to check the roundness of my neck. Just use a piece of 80 grit paper and basically give it the old shoe shine. It works quite well to hit all the high points. I like to draw out my transition point and leave it very fat, and basically at this point I'm just going at it with a knife, making sure that everything is smooth and that I'm feeling, and with my fingers. Actually, I'll tend to close my eyes and feel every transition with my eyes closed, so that way I can really get a sense of what's going on, and I'll check with some rulers and whatever else is straight that's lying around to get it really, really feeling good, and I'll finish it off with the file and sandpaper. I mean, right now we're not focusing too much on sound, but really truly the most important thing about a guitar, which is how it feels in your hands, and I gotta make it comfortable for me, or at least my client, and since this one is for the University of Rhode Island competition, I'm doing it for me. When transitioning the heel, I like to use a really heavy back piece of 80 grit paper to smooth out any lumps and so on and so forth. It goes very, very quick. Blend all those last bits together, make sure that everything feels good and looks good. It's tedious and takes a bit of time, but I'm very happy with generally how my necks feel. One of the things I like to look at is that glue line to make sure that it's perfectly symmetrical, so that way I know I've got a good blend all the way around. If I was a smart man, I'd do all this detail work on the headstock before I do it, but I'm always so excited to get the neck attached to the guitar and get on with it that I inevitably forget. So this is more or less what I'm doing when I finished all that out, because it's done off of a 1/4 inch flush trim router bit, and at this point it's just a lot of cleanup. I like to sand the body as well, and at this point, because my neck is completely finished out, I'm going to level off that heel block that was just some arbitrary thickness that got glued on. I like to use my modified Lee Nielsen, I believe that's a number 60. I like to give my back the first pass. I prefer to not go too crazy with the sanding, but give the whole thing a sand before I do this. Now, I like to wet out the entire guitar. I'm just using water, being very careful around the glue joints that I'm not flooding the surface, but this does a really good job of raising the grain, and the more prep work I can do now, the better it will be for applying the finish, because it's not going to puff and it's not going to fight me nearly as much. Don't go too wet with the water, but just enough to dampen the surface. You can see that the top is already drying, and I'm working quickly and determinedly, but not going crazy. So I'll put that aside, let it dry. After this, I like to sand back everything very, conservatively with a bit of 220 and then 320, and I'll take it out into the sun and check to make sure I've got all of the lines and striations that are out and that there's no lumps on the heel. Check the sides. This is really your last moment before anything is too far gone to fix. Using a scraper, and you turn your corners how you like to do it. I like a scraper and a file and some sandpaper. You do you. Here comes the most magical moment, where you take your nasty old pad with some fresh shellac and seal in the purflings on the back, making sure you don't drag that rosewood color over, and just give it a good wash. That is truly one of the most pretty moments. And I'm going to do this over the entire guitar. And actually, what you didn't see, and I forgot to record, is that I have the top finish. Now I'm going to use the Gork's Good Filler to fill all of the pores, which is, in my opinion, the best filler out there because it's very easy to use and it sands beautifully. You're going to take this whole beautiful guitar and smear it in essentially what looks like mud, because you can keep on modifying the stuff with water. You can really get it down deep into the pores and basically do a next to perfect fill in a single pass, which is fantastic. So sand it all back and repeat as needed. Lock it in with shellac every time. Thanks for watching. This one is a lot of fun. I missed you at the show, and to those who did come out to visit me, I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. Like, subscribe, Patreon, all that sort of fun YouTube stuff, and see you on the other side. Is anybody still watching? This guitar's available if you want it. Check out mebrune.com. I'll give you a good special discount if you shoot me an email.